and just run through your background and experience.
Okay. Obviously, Roger Brown, candidate for Knox County Sheriff. I was born and raised in Mount Vernon, Ohio. I graduated from the Mount Vernon High School and the Knox County Career Center. Married to my wife, Lisa. For the last 20 years, we have an 11-year-old son, Lucas. I started my career at the Sheriff's Office in 1993 as a special deputy. I volunteered until about October of 93 when I was hired full-time in the jail division. I worked the next 2.5 years in the jail division, became state certified in corrections. In 1996, I left the jail division, went to the patrol division for the next 11.5 years. While in the patrol division, I became certified in computerized voice stress analysis. It's pretty much the same as or close to the polygraph test. With that, I conducted pre-employment interviews with prospective employees for the Sheriff's Office. I also conducted CBSA examinations on them and then reported back to the administration on my findings. In 1999, still while at the Sheriff's Office, I purchased and owned and operated a small business in this county. Ran it till 2003, Electric Motor Business Service, which was on the south side of the county. I handled the day-to-day operations of the business. I managed the budget. I hired and fired and disciplined employees. I continued on in the patrol division until it was 2007 when I was transferred to the detective division. For over the last 4 years, I was a detective there at the Sheriff's Office and was later promoted to detective sergeant. As of December of this last year, I was required to resign from my position at the Sheriff's Office. It's my understanding, according to their legal opinion, I was a classified employee because I was in the union. I was a sergeant, again, in the detective division. My opponent obviously got to keep his job because he's not in the union.
I wonder about that.
Well, as a detective, part of my duties were to assist the day-to-day operations of the Sheriff's Office, assist the patrol division, assist in the detective division, and also any issues arise in the jail division with criminal activity. I've investigated every major crime in this county, for anywhere from a bad check to a homicide. I've got convictions in all related criminal cases. That's pretty much the background of me. Also, while I was a detective, I managed the evidence room at the Sheriff's Office. I also managed 130 sex offenders we had at the office. At the time, I was also in charge of conducting background checks and issuing concealed carry permits to permit holders.
If you can express it briefly, why are you running for sheriff?
At this point, I am the most qualified, most experienced candidate to be the next sheriff of this county. You know, I've got 18 years in at the Sheriff's Office. I have gathered and gained more experience in the last 18 years than a lot of officers do retiring at 30 years.
Is that what you think sets you apart from your opponent?
Experience does set me apart from my opponent. Again, as I touched on some of the things that I have done at the Sheriff's Office, I have worked in pretty much every division of the Sheriff's Office. So leading the Sheriff's Office, it's my opinion that if you're going to lead and direct the Sheriff's Office, you should have experience in all areas of the Sheriff's Office, not to just oversee the office.
The Sheriff's Office and jail have the largest budget of any county department. What can be done to contain or control spending?
Well, I'll start with the patrol division. One of my goals for the future at the Sheriff's Office is to have my patrol division begin to conduct investigations instead of forwarding investigations, felony investigations to the detective divisions. If they start investigating some of their own cases, we're going to have some less overtime issues. That's a start with that, and my detectives can do more. What is most critical right now in this county is drug investigations, which is causing a lot of issues we're having here. Other budgetary issues are ways of saving and helping the budget. I will be a working sheriff. My captain will be working. We will not just administrate for the office. We will do day-to-day operations of the Sheriff's Office. If we have to do a transport for the jail, if we have to go out and work the road, if we have to go assist the detective division in investigations, we will do those three things. I also will have a plan to enhance our special deputies unit. It is a volunteer unit. they're required to volunteer 16 hours a month just to keep their commission. I am now, because I lost my job, am required to keep my commission. I volunteer now for the village of Fredericktown, and at no charge to them. The special deputies, again, required to keep up their time to keep their commission. They can assist in the day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office.
You mentioned having the patrol officers begin or doing some or some investigations there. Wouldn't that result in the deputies not having enough time to do the regular patrol duties, or
No, I don't.
was there some point where they would hand off the case to a detective if need be?
A patrol officer has 8 hours a day, as well as a detective has 8 hours a day. The example I'll give you is if you have, say, 20 patrol officers, and they are handing off all these felony cases to your detective division. Some do work their own cases. Not all of them, do, but some do. I believe that you've got a detective sitting in his office with 10 cases on his desk. He's got to prioritize on what cases he handles. So there's really no difference in the patrol guy handling the case when he gets time in between calls or anything else to make follow-up phone calls, stop somewhere and do a quick interview, things like that. So I do not believe it will affect the patrol of this county.
Okay. What qualifications do you have as far as union negotiations? Because that's obviously going to be an important.
Sure. I have never negotiated anything to do with the union. We are able to pick or at least vote on who wants to be a union steward or whatever. I've never had an interest in doing that. Pretty much the way it is.
So you haven't been involved in negotiations from either side at this point? So.
The only thing I have done, obviously, is given opinions on what I think needs to be in the negotiations and what doesn't. That's correct.
Okay.
But just to follow up a little bit on that, even though I have not been in those negotiations, you understand that a lot of those negotiations also affect the county budget because they're negotiating with the sheriff and obviously either wanting money, wanting benefits and things like that. So, it's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. I think the question, we coming up with several of us came up with these questions. I think the intent is as much to see about having dealt with the process of negotiations as much as whether or not you're represented on one side or the other. Because obviously negotiating deals like that is almost a talent in itself.
Well, and again, I believe that I do have some experience that will be necessary in that, Chuck, because again, for the last 18 years, I've done nothing but dealt with people in law enforcement, and you can look at my conviction rate. Mm-hmm. I've gotten people to, been able to cooperate and get people to admit to me to murdering somebody or stealing or doing this and doing that. So if you're talking about, am I able to communicate with people? I think I've got a proven record in all my convictions that I can communicate with people. And not only that, as being a business owner in this county, again, it's all about communications, and I can certainly communicate.
Do you have a plan, this would be right up your alley, I think, for tackling or trying to clear any of the cold cases on record?
I do. Again, part of that's going to take freeing up my detectives. That's huge because, again, when they're juggling numerous cases, they prioritize. But again, it goes back to the patrol division investigating some of the burglaries and some of the the felony thefts and some other things that they can do. They're trained. They just need a little bit more advanced training, maybe on some interviews and stuff like that. But that's certainly going to free up my detectives to do some of that. We do, when you say cold cases, you want to give me I'll reference whatever you give me an idea.
I'm not as familiar with all the cases around here, but there's usually several of them.
Sure.
I know there's one, a woman that was murdered out in southeastern part of the county.
Okay, I believe you're talking about the Laura Heaton Mills case from either 1986 or 1987, which is a cold case. Gene Davis's homicide.
Gene Davis is one I've heard about, yeah.
Gene Davis's homicide was December 20th of 2009. I led that investigation just 18 days shy of 2 years when I had to leave. That is not a cold case in my opinion. That case was turned over to two very, very capable and very experienced detectives who's working it now. Obviously, that's the two homicides that I'm aware of that are outstanding unless there's something back years and years ago. But the BCI come up with a program a year or so ago to where they are now assisting in cold case investigations. I certainly will open up the Lower Heaton Mills case, get that pointed in the right direction so we can at least get some focus back onto that case. A lot of it, Chuck, is you're limited to a certain amount of guys, and things in this county, as I spoke about, have been very difficult in the last 4 years for the manpower that we have at the sheriff's office, the limited number of people to do these investigations. So we are going to have to go outside and look at other resources to help, and BCI is free, so they are certainly willing to help out.
Yeah, most departments I'm familiar with always have, it seems like there's 2 or 3 cases in each
Right.
county that you just can't get over that.
Mm-hmm.
Some point.
But again, I'll go back to, as you spoke of Gene Davis' case, I do not believe that's a cold case. Is it not solved? It's not solved. But I can tell you that me and another detective were doing interviews the week of December, just prior to December when I left there.
Mm-hmm.
So that should give you an idea that the case is still active.
Is there a official definition of what constitutes a cold case?
Well, I'm sure there is an official definition, but when you're still, in my opinion, you're still getting leads, you're still able to do follow-up, things like that. To me, it's not a cold case, and I do not believe Gene's is.
So there's not a point where you say, well, we've done all we can, we'll just have to hope something breaks.
Again, it goes back to
Yeah.
whether you're getting leads or anything like that. Was there some dry spells in the middle of that investigation? There was.
Mm-hmm.
There was sometimes you didn't hear from anybody for a month, but then maybe the next month you're getting 2 or 3 tips.
Mm-hmm.
So, and compare that to the Lower Heaton Mills case, you haven't heard about it for years, no tips, no nothing. Mm-hmm.
We have heard some complaints that deputies, detectives, whoever, do not always dust for prints when they're taking a burglary theft report.
Correct.
But I know in some reports that it's done.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it's done. Is that a procedural flaw, or is there a standard for when they go to that extent in a case?
Well, I'll tell you, what you normally look for when you go into a residence, a business, or anything else is items that you can obtain latent prints from. A lot of it depends on the item that you're wanting to print.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a good surface, if it's not a good clean surface, if it's a rough surface, the deputies take into consideration whether or not something can be printed there. And there is a lot of officers that do take fingerprints, and every one of them evaluate the scene when they walk in. Is that something that I would want my officers every place they go in to just throw around dust and mess up your whole house? No. That's one thing that I don't believe is appropriate. I believe that the officer needs to be upfront with the person and explain to them, educate them on why they're not taking prints. I used to get the same calls as a detective. Why did your deputy not do fingerprints? And I discussed it with them. Sometimes I've went to the scene and looked at what they've had and explained to them why. So there's a communication problem there on a lot of it, Chuck, that you can't dust for prints in every situation.
That kind of touches on another question I had here. Our current sheriff is, not always available.
That's correct.
For to the public or the media.
Mm-hmm.
What's your philosophy regarding an open dialogue with your constituency?
One of my goals, one of my focuses for the sheriff's office, Chuck, is to have obviously a public informations officer. As of right now, the sheriff does a majority of it, or to be honest with you, done all of it until the election process, and then my opponent has made the paper quite often in the recent few days and week. We will have a public informations officer. If the sheriff's not available and the captain's not available, somebody will be available to answer those questions. We have a communication problem out there with not only you as the media, we have a communication problem with the public and also with local law enforcement. We need to rebuild and re-strengthen that communication issue. We will, in my opinion, solve a lot more crimes if we are open and free with some information. You're not going to get everything. I mean, there's certain bits and pieces of information that can make or break a case, but there certainly will be an open dialogue.
So it comes down to the most basic question of all.
Okay.
Why should people vote for you?
Well, Chuck, I tell you, if you go to the voting booth, all I want people to think about is who has the most experience to lead 55 plus people at the sheriff's office, who has investigated homicides, who has investigated pretty much the majority of cases you could think of. It's come across your newspaper in this county. I have the experience in those areas. I have investigative experience. I'm the only candidate to have investigative experience. I am the only candidate who is state certified in corrections. Most people don't think a lot about that, but here's the thing. The jail's budget is over $2 million. You better know what's going on in the jail division. I have experience in the patrol division. So I pretty much have experience all throughout the sheriff's office. So I do believe that the leader needs to, or the person who's going to lead the sheriff's office needs to have that experience, because at some point you're going to have an employee come to you, and we got a lot of great guys out there and a lot of competent guys, but somebody's going to come to you one day and say, how do I handle this? What do I do with that? Well, I've been there. I've done that. So experience is the biggest thing, Chuck. Obviously my opponent has 24 years of experience. I have 18. But if you look at my record, if you Google me, whatever you want to do, you're going to find out that I have a pretty good track record with convictions in this county. And again, owning my own business, I have management experience. So it's all about experience in this race. We're both eligible. There's no question about us being eligible. But who does Knox County want to lead the sheriff's office when we have another major event like we had in the past November? I have that experience in all aspects of it. Not that we want that to happen, but you and I both know crime's here and crime's here to stay, and we need to try to fight it as much as possible.
Are there any other issues that you see as important in this race, or that you'd like to address at this time?
Another thing I'd like to address that we didn't speak on is the Crime Stoppers program in this county. As of right now, we have to utilize the Crime Stoppers program out of Licking County. They have done a good job for us, but we don't technically control that here. We have to use them. I do believe that we need a Crime Stoppers program. I do believe we can get the individuals of this county and also businesses of this county to donate money, and we can control it. We can communicate with the media, and when the media calls and what's going on with Gene Davis' case or what's going on with this case, you guys are going to know, because you're going to be directly involved with helping the sheriff's office with the communications of that. So it's going to be a big vicious circle, but it needs to be done. And again, I think we'll solve more crimes with that. I also will re-implement our neighborhood watch program that we used to have a nice, decent program throughout the county. We had one employee that took care of that. Obviously, due to budgeting and funding, we no longer have a community relations officer to take care of that. That will be the sheriff's responsibility and the captain's responsibility, and even could go as far as our public information officer. The problem in this county, we've got a lot of crime here. We've got a lot of drug issues. We've got a lot of thefts and burglaries. And if we don't get the public involved again, it's going to be very difficult to combat a lot of these things that's going on here. The public, we have to have their help. When you have 2 to 3 patrol guys in 525 square mile, it's very difficult for them to, see everything or be able to solve a lot of these crimes. But if the public would just be involved, we have crime tip lines, they can be anonymous. Educate the public on, you're not going, you don't have to worry about going to court or this or that every time you want to call in a tip, a suspicious vehicle or whatever. But we need that involvement in order to combat some of this crime in this county.